Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today we are joined again by Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, the divorce doctor. Hi, Dr. Elizabeth.
Hi, Susan. Thanks so much for having me. I love being here and with your audience. Makes me so happy. Thanks for having me.
Me too. I just told you I basically run through my little Rolodex of topics in my mind and come up with topics that you and I can talk about so that I can have you back on the show. I love having you on, and I know my listeners really connect with you. For those who are out there listening right now who haven't heard Dr. Elizabeth's, I think 7 other episodes, there's plenty of them. Go find them. We've talked about toxic masculinity, divorce and depression, anxiety and depression during COVID. One of your episodes, when will this be over? And we were talking both about COVID, which still, as we tape this, is not over, and divorce is taking forever. That's in the top 10 episodes. We have so many episodes, but this one's really important for a variety of reasons. Oh, another episode was your book, Light on the Other Side of Divorce, her book launch. It's right behind her. For those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel, go get the book if you haven't yet and listen to that episode because she dropped some great tips for finding the light on the other side of divorce. So, but today we're going to talk about the fact that April is Alcohol Abuse Awareness Month. This is a topic that I really want to shine some light on for a variety of reasons, some of them obvious. And when I thought about who can I bring on as a guest, for those of you who have heard Dr. Elizabeth's other episode, read her book, know that she has had her brushes with alcohol abuse. I have as well. I've shared in other episodes that I am a child of an alcoholic father and have a variety of other brushes with alcohol use disorder in my life as well. And frankly, we're not special, Dr. Elizabeth, are we? Alcohol abuse, unfortunately, is, I think I just read a statistic today that alcohol abuse is the #1 disease in the United States.
Yeah. I want people to also understand that we've all been affected by alcohol use and abuse, because anyone ever watched Mad Men? What do you think was happening when a lot of the laws that we have today for us were being made? They were made at bars. You went into someone's office and they'd open up and have a bar. So we've all been affected by alcoholism, even if it wasn't in our family or friend directly, because of the prominence and the normalizing of alcohol in the world.
Right. We glorify it. You mentioned Mad Men. That is, my father was in advertising. That was my childhood. I knew how to make a gin martini with dirty. I think by the time I was probably 8 or 9, I was a bartender for my dad's parties because he was always entertaining guests. I've never actually watched very much of Mad Men because it reminds me so much of living through that. But we live in a society that does glorify alcohol to a large degree. We drink it to celebrate. Yep. We drink alcohol to decompress and de-stress. Mm-hmm. It's so ingrained. We think we need it to have a good time. There's just so much about it. In fact, Soberlink, which is one of the sponsors of the show, they had a post today on Instagram that I put into my stories because I thought it was so powerful. And it was about all of those things. We think we need it to have a good time, say on vacation or something like that. Is it really that we need it to have a good time, or is it that we want to be someone else in order to have a good time? That was one of the points that they pointed out, one of the myths of alcohol. And that's so sad to think about.
Yeah, it's really painful. And I just want to say, as we start talking about this, I really want to say and send my heartfelt condolences to those of us who have lost people to this disease. This disease is deadly. Just because our society accepts it does not mean the reality of it is that it takes lives. We've lost 2 people this week in my clinical practice to alcohol. Yeah. And so this is not about having fun. And, this is about people who try to find a way to cope with the unmanageable experience of emotions, which we've talked about on a lot of your podcasts with us together, that coping with emotions through substances is what ends up leading to substance use disorder. It is somebody who is innocently trying to manage the difficulties of life, but the substance itself becomes destructive because you need more and more and more. And I just want to say to anyone who's listening that Susan and I hear you, and we know this is serious. I get very upset when I see these advertisements, as you mentioned, and soberlink mentioned, with fun. Like, look how much fun you can have. Some part of the population can have fun. A big part of the population cannot. And it's really important to be clear about their own relationship to alcohol. A whole new thing that's happened that really disturbs me. I wonder what you think about this, Susan, is this whole mom wine thing.
Yeah. Mommy's Little Helper has gone from being Valium to being a glass of wine and I see, you talked about the glorifying and the advertisements. I see on social media quite a bit,
Yes.
People posting things and they're my friends and people I know and people I don't know. It's just a very popular thing to be like, whoo, I've just had the longest day ever. And then, I saw someone the other day, they had a glass of wine that was the size of, a keg. And it's funny and it's not funny.
Right. And I think for those of us who've been touched by alcoholism, it can be very triggering. People would not write, I had a really hard day and put a needle injection in their arm if they were doing heroin.
Right.
And so why are we okay with that, with it being alcohol? I also think, Susan, and tell me what you think about this, but I'm always concerned about when people post a lot about alcohol and booze, because as someone who, has chosen to be sober and not because I have an addiction, it's just not a topic of conversation. I went to a wedding recently and every toast talked about how drunk the parents like to get with the kids. Like every toast, it came up in some way. And my heart really broke because I thought, if we're talking about this so much, something is probably going on with it. Just like anything, right?
Right.
You find you're talking all the time about how you look, like you probably have some insecurities about how you look. And so I really want to encourage people to just take a moment and notice how much you think about wanting to have a drink, talk about having a drink, think about drinks as like the fun activity. Like just start noticing, I'm all about awareness. Just start noticing your languaging around it, your experience around it. Just start noticing. I think that's really just an interesting thing to try.
Yeah, I love that you point that out. I'm also a person, because of my family experience, that has chosen not to drink in my life. And, one thing that I notice is that makes people uncomfortable.
You're right.
You were saying that about the wedding, and I'm thinking, at times, and it's very well meaning on the part of many people, like, oh, I don't want to drink in front of you if it's going to be difficult for you. And I'm like, no, it's not difficult for me. Do what you want, but it makes other people uncomfortable. And I always just wonder, is that discomfort because just what you were saying, is it something that actually is a sensitive subject for you? And my not drinking is something that then shines a light on that for you, which is not the intention. It's my personal choice. I have no opinions about other people's personal choices in that. And I do want to say that. You've said it. I want to say that this episode is not about people should not drink. That is not what we are talking about at all. This is, alcohol abuse or substance abuse. Yeah. And unfortunately, part of that is the fact that our society aggrandizes it as a substance, as something that is exciting and fun and necessary and normal, that then for people who don't have the ability to drink normally or imbibe alcohol normally, it allows it to get out of control. It fosters that relationship because hey, you're just stopping in at the bar to have a drink. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not visiting the opium den, smoking a pipe, or going to the, crack house and whatever you do in a crack house. I'm not sure. Sorry.
I think they smoke crack.
Okay.
So one of the things I remember someone telling me this story that, 10 teenagers go on a ski trip. And one of them steals a bottle of vodka from their dad's or mom's house. They all drink it. Weekend's over. They go home. I think the percentage is like 8 of those kids go home and don't really think about the vodka again. 2 of them can't wait to get another drink and try to find another one as soon as they can. Yeah. And I always say to my kids, like, we don't know which of the kids you are, especially because of their family history. Like, this is where the curiosity comes. What is my relationship with this substance? And how literally it is a relationship. Because I remember when in my situation where my ex-husband struggled from alcohol abuse disorder, what happened was his relationship with alcohol became the primary relationship, no longer his relationship with me or our children. It is really a relationship. So asking yourself, what is my relationship with it? Do I know ways to relax, to have fun without it? You don't have to, but do you? And I think a big piece that comes up so often, I can't tell you how many times I hear this, Susan, is like, well, they're functioning, or they're not, someone said it to me the other day, like, it's not like they're under a bridge with a paper bag. That is one way that someone's substance use disorder manifests itself. Like, there's so many phenotypes, right? Like, yes, we all look, you have blonde hair, I have brown hair, like, we look different. So does substance use disorder.
I have brown hair.
You have brown hair and blonde hair.
Yeah.
So there are different ways for it to manifest. And so I live in New York City, you live in Chicago. Many people have jobs that involve going out every night and drinking as part of their job, right? That person might struggle with a substance use disorder, even if they're bringing in a really big paycheck. You might be a mom who gets your kids to school, packs the lunches, does everything you need to do, gets them to the doctor's appointments, and can't go to sleep at night without 3 glasses of wine. And one of my clients recently, who is the latter, a mom, she didn't even know how much she depended on her drinking. And it was only 1 glass of wine until she had to stop drinking for something. And she realized this huge flood of emotions that came through. She was managing her emotions by drinking alcohol, and she had no idea.
Right. And it's, you mentioned that it becomes the primary relationship. And that reminded me of a conversation I had recently with someone who had given up drinking. And they said one of the big reliefs in post-drinking life was that their life was no longer all about, when am I going to get my next drink? Where am I going to get my next drink? How can I get my next drink? And I hadn't realized, but the way he was describing it is, it was really a constant of, we're going out for a hike. Well, that's a 4-hour hike. There will be no bars out in the wilderness. Do I bring just so I can have a beer? Do I bring a 6-pack with me? It was something I hadn't even thought of, but he was like, it was exhausting to have my life controlled by the need for my next drink. Now that is very clearly disordered, right? And it may not be at that level for everyone, but I love that you've invited people to just think about your relationship with that 1 glass of wine.
Yeah. And so many people during COVID, I remember, were just, especially with working from home not during COVID, but during shutdown and lockdown, the glass of wine or whatever the drink was the thing that delineated work and home. And so it would be this transition object, basically, is what we would call it. And then because things were so stressful, it was reducing stress a little bit. I mean, it became very prominent for a lot of people. And
Yep.
I've heard a lot of clients who are having trouble taking that out.
Sure.
And because we were, as I've always said, we were dealing and are dealing with an existential trauma. There's a lot of stress. And so, look, numbing out is one of the ways to manage. And, we can be addicted to alcohol. We can be addicted to Netflix. We can be addicted to our phones. I mean, and it's about how we manage the difficult emotions. And I'm so glad you shared that story about the preoccupation with like, where am I going to get my next drink? Because you're touching on like the energetic pull of needing something to get you through.
Right.
People do this, on first dates or any date. I always say to people, like, would you go drunk to a job interview? Why are you drinking on a first date? Like, this is way more important than a job interview, right? But people just think, oh, I have to drink to have fun or to relax or to look cool. And I really feel like we have a false sense of, I guess what it really comes down to, it just occurred to me, Susan, is like our difficulty as a culture with being present.
Mm-hmm. Being in the now, being here when the now is hard.
Right. Like, that's why I don't drink when I'm with my friends. I want to be present. I don't want anything to take me out of that moment. And that is what substances do.
Yeah,
But
that's why we're so attracted to them.
Exactly.
That's what it struck me when you were saying we're dealing with this ongoing stress. So we numb out with a cocktail. And then we get to where some people are going to get to where my friend was, stressing out about where they're going to get their next drink. And so you're stressed. What have you done in your stress cycle? You've numbed it only to the point of adding more stress in your life about, continuing that substance. And yes, COVID, you talk about that being that existential stressor, that existential trauma. I pulled some of the stats on what has happened with alcohol use during COVID. And I have both statistics and then I have an anecdote that I just think says it all. But so they say that alcohol use during the pandemic on average for people between 30 and 80
large range
has gone up 14%. And this is what I actually find a little scary. It's gone up 17% for women. If we're going to look specifically at women, 19% between people aged 30 and 60%, and binge drinking, which is 4 or more drinks in 2 hours, has increased by 41% for women. 41% for women. I mean, that's a scary statistic. And I can tell you, so during COVID, one of the divorces I was mediating was a couple that owned wine stores, and their business went through the roof during COVID. And at one point they sent me a picture of the outside of one of their stores. And it was car after car pulling up in front of the store and popping the trunk. And a runner would come from the store with a box of wine and put it in the trunk, and they would drive off. And in fact, I live in Chicago. You want to talk about a place that celebrates alcohol. And that was a common sight in front of every liquor store, which is on every block in the city, it became so easy to you could get your alcohol delivered. You could go pick it up by popping your trunk in front of a store. Nobody was monitoring your consumption because now you're just ordering it from Uber delivers or whatever it is.
At least in New York, there's this Drizzly, which is a delivery of booze to your house. And, I would be okay with people drinking who have substance use disorder if we had in this country a really beautiful healing process.
Yeah.
Or we had good
health
treatment program. Yeah. Exactly. Like, the problem is this is not easily solved because of how the changes it does to your brains, and because of the services that we don't really have. So it's not like breaking your leg, where you break your leg and they fix it and you have crutches. Like, this is, first of all, it's a disease, if you struggle with it, that impacts everybody that you know. So I remember this image, and maybe you've heard of this, Susan, where imagine someone drinking a bottle of something, and that it's going down their esophagus and out to everybody that they know. Like, everyone else is drinking, and it deeply affects your family members, your coworkers, your friends. It impacts everybody around you, and really impacts you. And there's so much healing to do, and we just don't have good enough supports. And we know many people who've gone to, and my ex-husband went to 3 rehabs this was 15 years ago, but each of them were at $25,000.
Right.
Insurance did not cover those. We had to take out loans, and he drank every time he came out the next day.
Right.
And so we just it's a progressive disease, and we don't have the services here. So you want to help yourself, because it's very hard to heal from. I mean, I think that's the truth.
Yeah. And it's become even harder, just as all mental health. Yes. Access to resources has gotten harder I'm not telling you anything as a mental health provider that you don't know, right? But there are less beds available. Yes. There are, there's just less availability. When's the last time you were able to take on a new patient for a routine mental health issue? Right. I don't know that there are any, right? But I don't know I know a lot of therapists. I don't know any who are taking on new patients. I have several who can't even handle the patient load that they have, and people are so desperate. And it's the same thing with needing help with alcohol abuse. There's just very little. It's more intractable than so many of the other problems that we may face. And yet, as you just said, you can go to rehab 3 times, spend $75,000, and pick up a drink the next time the day you leave. Exactly. I think the average is something like it takes 9 rehab visits.
I think it's 9.
Yeah, 9. And they're not 25,000. I mean, I've dealt with this with some clients over the years, and some of these programs are now, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 or more. You want to go to that nice one in Malibu? Right. That one's $100,000 for 30 days. Right. And you can't get in.
You can't, right. There's no space. I have to say also, for people who are going through a divorce, I get it. Going through a divorce is incredibly stressful. It is probably the most stressful thing that you could do. We've talked about this before, Susan. Courts do not understand substance use disorder. They are in like the 1950s. I mean, they do not understand it. They think it's willpower. So if you are noticing, if you go through a divorce, an increase in drinking, please know that is very dangerous. And you can speak to this too, for your litigation, for your mediation. It is incredibly, incredibly dangerous.
Oh, well, and it's, this is a problem that, it's not by chance that so many people where there's an alcohol use disorder in the family end up in divorce. Yeah. Unfortunately, the additional stress that alcohol use disorder will bring to a relationship very often is something that couples can't get beyond for many good reasons. But it's also, in a divorce case, one of the most difficult problems to deal with, because it's not something that's easily provable, and it's not something that's easily monitored, and it's not something that's easily stopped. So all of those things a judge isn't going to order someone, well, you stop drinking. Right. Court order. I banged my gavel. Right. It's not like waving a magic wand. I mean, that's why my listeners know I'm such a strong supporter of soberlink. It's at least, not at least, it is a way to either give somebody accountability so that they know that their alcohol use is going to be known, Or if you're being accused of having an alcohol problem and you feel you don't have one, it's a way to prove that you don't.
Right.
So at least it gives some accountability and a way to build back some trust if you are getting past an alcohol use disorder. Because I do want to say that we've been talking about how hard it is to get help. You can. People recover from live sober lives and get beyond a dependency upon alcohol and other substances.
Yep.
So that is a possibility. One thing I want to make sure we touch on while we have time is, you mentioned already, take the drink and it comes shooting out in all the directions. Let me tell you some of the effects that I found in my research, effects of having an alcoholic parent or a parent with alcohol use disorder on children. So the effects of growing up around alcohol use and abuse are sometimes so profound, they last a lifetime for children. Here are just a few of the ways that it can affect children. They have trust issues. They are incredibly hard on themselves and have self-judgment issues. They have incredibly low self-esteem. They have interpersonal issues, and they themselves have relationship problems. They use and abuse alcohol at a much higher rate. They suffer from anxiety, depression, and PTSD at a much higher rate. And they almost universally have poor academic performance. And those are just a few. I just picked some of the ones that are, at the higher end of the spectrum, but the list went on so long, it was actually very depressing to read it. But the one highlight that the article that I was reading made was, sometimes knowing that is enough for someone to stop and take that look at their use of alcohol, because it takes them outside of themselves and seeing that effect is a generational thing and that they are going to visit some of these things on their children.
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes.
What a powerful list that is. I mean, so I feel really compelled to say that, to explain a little bit about what happens. So when you have a parent who is numbing out, because a lot of times people think, oh, this must come from a violent alcoholic. No, you have a parent who is numbing out and not present and unpredictable, which is just what happens when you drink, like whether you're an alcoholic or not. Children interpret parents' behavior. If parents don't explain why something is happening, they interpret it as being their fault. They try to walk around and predict what's going to happen. You did a beautiful, smart thing, Susan. You made your dad the drink. That was a way of connecting to him. Right. But it was it also probably has led you, without having to disclose, to doing things, serving people in ways that don't fit you, but fit the other person. Right.
Exactly. 100%.
Exactly. So we do these things to help us get through that worked when we were younger, but don't work anymore. So being a perfectionist when your parent is an alcoholic is great because they're not going to get mad at you, or or being really quiet or not trusting people. All of those things work really well. That list works well when you're in that home, but then you grow up and you still have those. So it deeply affects children in the core of themselves. I can already hear listeners who are listening who have a partner who has substance use disorder and you don't, worrying, oh my God, my kids are going to be so messed up. What kids need is at least one consistent adult in their life. If you can be consistent, regulate your emotions and your substance use and be there for them and be present, they will understand what it's like to not feel that with their other parent.
They have something to compare, right?
Exactly.
They don't know that's how everyone is.
Exactly. Because many of us who grew up in substance use disorder had one parent who was using and the other who was enabling. And so there was no parent to say, this is not okay. But if you are that person in this divorce, that's hugely healing. So I just don't want people to get too catastrophic about it.
Yeah, no, and I'm so glad you raised all of that. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted this episode. I just feel that this is a topic. We're not saying to anyone out there, or I'm going to say this, we don't have any of the solutions. This is a difficult problem that people are going to struggle with forever, but awareness and shining a light on it are the first step to any improvement in your life over this problem.
You know, Susan, you just brought up such an important point. And this is what I love about your podcast. You always shine the light on really tough, important things to talk about. You're so brave in this. And especially for substance use disorder, because the biggest emotion behind it is shame. Right?
Absolutely. Shame and
so
stigma.
No shame here. Like, you are doing the best you can, and you are having a trouble like managing your emotions by using this thing. Shame is what keeps people using. And so we are here to say there is no blame or shame here. We are here to say you can live a bigger, better, more grounded life. Because those of you who are listening, who are curious about your use of alcohol, you know your life's limited because of it.
Right. And we're telling you it's not an easy road, and there's not a lot of easy answers to this, but there is no shame in this. And that's it. You used exactly the word that I don't think, this is where I think there's that big convergence between divorce and alcohol use. Is they both are shameful.
Yes.
They both have stigma around them. You said judges think it's a self-control thing. You can just stop. People think, well, you're just a bad person. You couldn't make your relationship work. I mean, this is where our society really does put shame on people that we then internalize. And it comes around both these things. And God forbid you put the two of them together.
Yes.
Now we have divorce and we have alcohol use. And it's really, truly such a trauma for people to live with that, unfortunately, as you just said, it continues that cycle. And so divorce is a time where, because it's so stressful, if you were using alcohol to numb out, to not deal with the difficult emotions of your relationship that wasn't working, and now you're going through a divorce that's difficult, it may seem even more appealing to go have that drink, numb out from that, et cetera. So it just continues to escalate for you. I really, truly wanted an episode with someone like you, who's so wonderful about being able to talk about, these difficult issues in a compassionate way, because I know that you can. And it's not just, know that we have compassion for you. And I know one thing you always say is that people need to have compassion for themselves.
Well, that's what I was just thinking as you were talking. Like, I have so much compassion for people who are struggling and beating yourself up. I mean, this is not a willpower issue. This is a disorder. This is a disease. This is a brain chemistry issue that happens once you start using those reward systems. This is not your fault. I made a big mistake that I have made apologies for to my ex-husband. I didn't give him the dignity to have his own process. He needed to get sober in his own way. And I thought I knew how he was supposed to do it as a professional. And I didn't know. He had his own trajectory. And it wasn't until he was ready, for all of you who are with people who have substance use disorders, or if you have you'll be ready when you're ready. And that's why, by the way, it takes 9 times. It's not because the treatments are terrible. It's because most people usually go because someone else wants them to go. You'll know when you're ready, and then it will work, but it will only be when you're ready. And when you love someone who's struggling with a substance use disorder, love them even harder. Stay away from criticizing and judging, because I promise you, and those of you who struggle with this know this, they're their biggest critic. They're their biggest judge. They don't need any more judges. So try to find some compassion for yourself, for your partners, that you're really doing the best you can with the tools you've had. And maybe there's some better tools out there.
And seek that help. The one thing I will share about my dad's journey, I love my dad very, very, very much. And I'm so sorry that he had this struggle throughout his life. I mean, it really was, he died from cirrhosis and alcoholism, liver cancer, all based on that. And the last words my dad ever said to me were, I did this to myself. That was, and it's the saddest thing for me to know that at the end of his life, that was where he was. And it was that substance that brought him there, and those feelings as he looked back with some regret on his life. And I didn't want that for him. And I don't want that for other people, anyone I love, but anyone who's listening. This is something that you can get ahead of, there is hope and there is help. And, alcohol use awareness and abuse awareness. What we're really trying to do is shine some light, give you that moment to take that pause and do some thinking around your relationship with alcohol. And that's all that you really need to address. We're not, and then if you feel that you have something that needs some help, there are, reach out for that help. The one thing I do want people to know, I mean, probably the most successful way to stop drinking is the oldest way, or the oldest one I know of, Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, is still helping people. I don't even know how old it is. It started 100 years ago, some good long
1940 something. Yeah.
Okay. 1940. We're coming up on 100 years. If you are someone who is in a relationship or has a family member, Al-Anon is truly something that is a resource for you that will change your entire, life and your relationship with how you are dealing with someone who has an alcohol use and substance abuse problem. But, and if you can just, there's always information out there. I'll put links to some in the show notes. Do you have anything that you recommend?
Yeah. Well, one thing I just wanted to say is that we'll meet you wherever you are. So you don't have to be ready to go to a rehab. You don't have to be ready or want to go to an AA meeting, which, by the way, are wonderful. So is Al-Anon. They're all over Zoom now. You can get to a meeting anytime. You can have your camera off. You can turn the volume off, just try it. So it's easy now. You can talk to a therapist and be curious. I really want everyone to think about the word curious, because there's a gentleness to that. You're not going to get through this alcohol use disorder with a hard whip. It's not going to work. One of the things about any program is there's gentleness, compassion, and love for yourself. So if you're listening and you're thinking, my drinking really has increased since COVID, I wonder what that might be like. I wouldn't suggest you try to stop drinking. By the way, a lot of people try to do that and then see how they're doing. Like, that can be very dangerous. Reach out to a therapist, call a helpline, and just be curious about it. Just be curious. Don't judge yourself. Take it really slow. We really talk about being ready to change. So you could be -3 ready to change. You don't have to be ready to change. You can be wherever you are. Just be curious. Ask your partner, hey, have you noticed my drinking has increased? If you feel comfortable, ask a friend. Start talking about it. This month is such an important month for us to shine the light on this, that there's no shame in this at all. And one of the things that's so helpful, I think, about AA and Al-Anon is that you are with other people. So it gets rid of the shame. All these other people who've grown up with alcoholism or married to an alcoholic or struggle with alcoholism themselves. Like, you hear stories and you have compassion for the other people that you can then maybe apply to yourself. Because if you can have compassion for this person, a client of mine said the other day, like, he was sitting in a meeting, this person had said that he had killed someone in a drunk driving accident when he was drinking. And my client had so much compassion for this other man. And he thought, if I can have that level of compassion for him, how could I not have it for myself? And so this is about compassion, love, and acceptance. And the truth is, substance use comes from fear, despair, and hopelessness. The antidote to that is love, compassion. That's it.
Yeah, it's so true. And the other part is, and the other reason to shine the light is just to let you know you're not alone.
Definitely.
You're not the only person struggling with this. There's help out there, and there are people, there is no shame in this. So I love that you always, you always are able to say the things that I don't even have a plan when I ask you on the show anymore. I just know we're going to have an episode, and this is exactly what I wanted for people to be able to hear. So thank you so much. Again, I will put resources, and I'm going to put links to all of Dr. Elizabeth's episodes in the show notes for those of you who've not had an opportunity, and a link to her book. Because every single one of her episodes with me, and by the way, her podcast, the Divorce Doctor podcast, please go and check that out as well, because there's always hope and inspiration, and you're not alone in everything that Dr. Elizabeth does. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for having me.